Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, if Brexit means an end to freedom of movement, Britain will need a brand new immigration policy. Indeed, it was the reason many people voted to leave. And while many have thrown up their hands in horror at what's been going on at the Mexican border or in Italy and Hungary, an exclusive poll for this programme suggests Britain still wants big cuts to immigration. A majority support a cap of tens of thousands a year, and even after the Windrush scandal, they support the hostile environment immigration system. They also care more about cutting immigration than making sure job vacancies in the economy are being filled. Here's our political editor, Gary Gibbon.
Thousands of children taken from their families and locked behind chain fence walls.
More than 600 migrants adrift on the Mediterranean.
These people are British. They are part of us.
The politics of immigration is sweeping through Western democracies. From the Mediterranean, inland to Northern Europe, and across the Atlantic to the Mexican border. Here it exploded in the EU referendum campaign and shaped the result.
Well, take them all in then! Why don't all of you together take them all in?
You were a refugee once.
The government now has to shape post-Brexit immigration policy. The EU would like it to be as open as possible. The more relaxed the British approach to immigration from the EU, potentially the better the trade deal on offer. Immigration policy's got to be part of the deal, and something like freedom of movement, if not freedom of movement, could well be part of that.
Yes. I don't think freedom of movement's done us any harm at all, myself. But again,
an awful lot of voters don't agree.
Well, because nobody would. Well, everybody plays to it.
I think they're missing something, which is, the disconnect on this issue that is there between Westminster and ordinary folk out in the country is as big on immigration as it's ever been.
In an opinion poll for this programme, 70% of those we surveyed said they now want to see reduced EU migration to this country. And the majority of them want it to be a big reduction. 73% of those we surveyed said they agreed with the government's target, getting net migration to this country down to the tens of thousands. And when we asked people which was more important to them, 61% said controlling EU migration, and only 30% said filling job vacancies in this country. If it's a question of filling all the job vacancies in Britain or controlling immigration, which one's the priority?
Controlling immigration. There's too many in here.
It might hurt the economy, some people argue.
Yes, it might, but...
Price worth paying, you say?
I think so, yeah.
Letting people that are useless to the country, really, basically. I think it's just not worth it.
You think people who voted for Brexit wanted numbers to come down and tighter controls?
Yeah.
And if they don't get that?
What's the point of having the Brexit? What's the point of coming out of Europe?
They need to cap it. They really do need to cap it.
Cap the numbers of people coming in?
Yeah, we're struggling. We're struggling as it is.
In theory, the government could bring in very tight controls on skills and visas, like they do with non-EU countries at the moment. Or they could go a long way down the road to freedom of movement itself, perhaps allowing people here from the EU if they have a job or are looking for one. The government has delayed its draft plans on what it wants to do on immigration, which has made some people think it sees immigration as a bargaining chip.
You have to compromise with them, you know what I mean? So,
and that includes on migration?
As well. Obviously, we can't be too harsh with that. We've got to be a bit lean.
Otherwise, they'll be harsh on trade, you think?
100%.
In recent months, some pro-Brexit ministers have been making some pro-migration noises. Their argument, Brexit's triumph in the referendum has reduced concern about immigration.
Both main political parties are now speaking about immigration head-on. They've taken it back into the mainstream, which I think politically is really, really important.
So you think some of the heat's gone out of the topic?
Yes, because the mainstream parties have now acknowledged that it's their responsibility to deal with.
The posh boy Tories, the vote leavers, that's right. Every single one of them, part of the Notting Hill dinner party set. They discussed immigration in the last few weeks of the referendum very reluctantly. They now think, isn't it wonderful, no one's talking about immigration. We can go on with net migration running at hundreds of thousands a year, and no one cares. A liberal Brexit, that's what they called it, and Boris, of course, Michael Gove and others support that.
Most people think that actually immigration should be brought down to tens of thousands, which is the government policy, and that includes 65% of Labour voters in the 2017 general election.
Labour MP for Don Valley, Caroline Flint's constituency, voted 70-30 for Brexit.
What do you think would happen politically if the two main parties signed up to something that looked quite a bit like freedom of movement in order to get a good trade deal?
Whatever we finally sign up to, if, and as we can see from this polling, not just Leave voters but those who voted to Remain do not feel that there is any change, I think it's going to be quite hard to sell that.
And could there be a reckoning?
Well, I hope it doesn't come to that.
We're basically campaigning for Britain to leave the European Union.
2 years ago, we caught up with Saki Bhatti, campaigning in Birmingham for his Brexit group Muslims for Britain. The message then, Brexit will get you a more generous migration policy for non-EU countries.
You were campaigning in this street
2
years ago, telling people, vote Brexit and you'll get equal treatment for non-EU citizens coming here. They get the same treatment. It's not going to happen. You can see that taking shape already.
Well, I don't agree.
It won't be equal, will it?
Well, I think that's what we have to campaign for, and I think that's what's really important. It's very clear.
Do you feel like you're winning?
I think it's a difficult argument. I fully accept that, but actually, you know, this is going to be a process.
The arrival of the Windrush commemorated today. The revelation that many were hounded for papers they didn't have as part of a crackdown on illegal immigration doesn't seem to have prompted a big shift in public opinion. Our poll suggests that 51% think the hostile environment policy, despite mistakes, should continue. 31% think it's wrong and should end. In our survey, 45% thought skin colour influenced the treatment of the Windrush generation. A third thought not. Many think it lurks behind quite a chunk of immigration concern.
You live in a multi-ethnic, multicultural, multinational society. And if you think that's gone too far already, I think as far as my grandchildren are concerned, you ain't seen nothing yet.
With the focus on trade and the economy, what happens to immigration policy after Brexit has not been centre stage. That could be about to change.
Well, if that's what Britain thinks, what do we do about it? You can follow this debate, by the way, live on YouTube, where we'll be going on a bit longer than the television programme. Echo Eshon, you're a British Ghanaian writer. Do you just have to do what the public says it wants, which is to cut immigration, or should you try and change their minds?
No, I think the real issue is about imagination and empathy. This idea that immigrants are different, are other, are less deserving of status, less deserving of humanity and connection, I think is wrong. To some extent, despite the bleakness of that poll, to some extent, I'm optimistic in the sense that I think Britain has got better as a country that deals with immigration. I can think back to my youth. I can think back to being abused and mocked because my family comes from Africa. And one of the things that's happened in Britain, the thing that's changed, is that I think Britain has become a more open, more tolerant place, not despite immigration, but because of immigration, because of the different sets of people that have come to this country and that live in a city like London.
Well, some of Britain maybe, but clearly not all of it.
Well, so my hope resides in the fact that once people understand that immigrants are not strange and other, I think we hopefully come to a slightly more tolerant and open society.
Roshan Ali, as a politician, what do you do? You know, is this the product of poor political leadership, or have you just got to get on and do what the people want?
I think it is a product of poor political leadership, and most parties at some point bear some responsibility in not taking that leadership role to make sure the public feels reassured about the genuine legitimate anxieties they have about rapid change, lack of support when new migrants arrive into an area, but also making the economic case for immigration, as well as the wider benefits of living in a multi-ethnic society. So I think there is a role for politicians. We need to step up.
To try and change people's minds?
Well, to try and make sure that we don't have a race to the bottom, we don't pander to extreme opinion. That is dangerous, especially in the light of what's happening internationally in other countries. But at the same time, that mainstream political parties face up to the challenges, face up to some of the issues that have been raised in public opinion polls as well, but not just mirror them, but make sure we work to improve attitudes, we work to ensure our society is much more tolerant. I don't really like the word tolerant, to be frank, because it means putting up with, but it's about celebrating difference and the different contributions that we all make with all our diversity, and recognising the strength in that diversity. It's really important we do
Andrew
that.
Rosendale, if people want immigration under 100,000, they want it cut drastically, is it your job to just get on and do it?
I think that we're slightly going off the subject here. It's not
the
about...
subject is what I decide it is today. So.
Okay. We're talking about tolerance and being an open society. Britain has always been a tolerant and open society. There are individuals who are not, but the British people have always been tolerant and open. So how do we manage immigration? That's the question we need to ask ourselves. And I think that most British people would say, of course we have immigration and we need immigration. We've always had immigration.
Most British people, according to that poll, say they want less of it. Is that your job?
People should be here on merit because they're going to contribute to the country. That's why free movement can never work, because it means effectively open borders and people coming in just because of their nationality, not because they necessarily want to contribute to our country. And that's what people voted for in the referendum. That's what the polls show, that they want immigration that's actually going to benefit our country. What's wrong with the Canadian system? What's wrong with the Australian system of immigration? What we need is an effective system that actually allows the right people to come into the country, but gives us control. Every sovereign nation needs control over its borders, and that's exactly what the British people voted for 2 years ago.
Let me bring in Costanza de Toma. You've been living in Britain from Italy, yes? But the Brexit vote has changed your mind about where you want to live. Why?
Yes, it has. I came in 1991. I'm one of those students that never left. So when I got here, I suppose I wasn't very highly skilled, but then I went on to get a degree and I went on to get a master's, and I suppose I am highly skilled now. So how can you judge where I'm highly skilled or not? I've decided that I want to leave. We've talked about businesses and why businesses might want to leave the country. Well, families operate in the same way. I have 3 kids, they're all born here. I have an Italian husband. I have a mother in Milan. You know, I have many things that I need to balance. And on balance, I've decided that this is not the country I want to bring up my kids in anymore, unfortunately. It breaks my heart. It's not been an easy decision, but it is a decision that I've had to make. And it wouldn't have happened unless the referendum had happened. That's what stopped me and my husband in our tracks, and we reconsidered our life plan.
Stuart MacDonald, the SNP has a much more welcoming view of immigration, and you say there's plenty of space in Scotland. I mean, when you look at these poll results, do you think we've got to change people's minds about immigration? Or do you think, well, there's a problem in England and they've got to sort it out?
I think there has been an absence of political leadership at Westminster level. And in fact, you only have to keep in mind that it's official government policy to have hostility as part of your migration policy. You've got ludicrous targets like the net migration target, which I don't think makes any sense and cannot be justified. Policies such as indefinite detention, splitting up families.
But you say it doesn't make sense. It's what people are saying they want. So what do you do about that?
There has to be leadership, and I think in Scotland one of the reasons why immigration hasn't played such a large part in the political agenda is because there has been political leadership there from Nicola Sturgeon, but from the leaders of other political parties is there as well. In contrast, at Westminster level we saw what Rushanara called the race to the bottom for too many years there, where it was one party trying to outbid the other on how it could bear down on immigration, accompanied by really horrible terminology and nasty rhetoric, and it's no wonder that that has fed through to an extent.
Rob Ford, you're an academic, you study these things, and you've studied this, the rise of this sentiment. Do you think people's minds are changeable? Is this about political leadership? Are the politicians following the people, or the people following the politicians?
I think that people's views on this are a lot more complex than they're often given credit for, and that actually, on the whole, voters are balancers. They recognise costs of migration. They also recognise benefits of migration. One consistent trend in the longer-run polling since Brexit is that more people recognise the benefits of migration, both Leave voters and Remain voters. That's very consistent on a range of polling. And when we look at the polling that you've just presented right now, you see that actually, while a lot of people say they want migration cut, they tend to say they want it cut a little. They weren't given the option to say stay the same. Other polling says that they will give that option. And the poll didn't ask about the costs, which is a problem when you're dealing with issues that ask people to balance costs and benefits. It is true that on average, people tend to default to wanting migration controlled, and they think it's the job of government to control it. So freedom of movement is very contentious. But it is also true that the large majority of people out there in the public recognise really important benefits from migration. And if you give them an opportunity to trade off the costs and the benefits, the picture looks a lot less bleak, I think, than your initial report suggested.
Well, I mean, there is a lot of sort of reasons to feel attitudes are bleak when you look at the poll and when you look at what people are saying in the street in that report, aren't there? Let me bring in Ignacy Tajewski. You're a Polish bar manager, aren't you?
I am indeed.
How do you feel when you see those sorts of attitudes?
It's confusing sometimes, and I've been here for close to 17 years, didn't speak any language or English at all when I first started, but hospitality was always my passion. Successful career over the years. I've been running pubs for 15 years now. I do what I love. But, you know, I settled here. My wife lives with me. I've got 2 kids. We're bored in here. But sometimes we just ask ourselves a question, you know, why is it that we need to prove that we actually you know, deserving to be here, you know? I've got permanent residentship and I could apply for British passport, you know. There was a point in my life where I loved to, you know, I thought, you know, I feel really strong connection with this country, you know, I've been here for so long and really, really love it. But, you know, every time just feels like you need to prove that you're worthy to live in here. You know, over the years, I've never been off sick, you know, I've been working, paying taxes, a lot of it, and don't feel like I need to justify why I've been doing it, why I really want to stay in this country. I came here to make my life better, that's true, because there was, you know, the country seemed to be, you know, just and had a great system, more opportunities, appreciating hard work, and that's what I went for. You know, and I've been, you know, living here for this years and really want to stay, but at this moment in time, you know, I'm not quite sure where we're going with that, because there's lots of talk about everything's going to change. You know, there would be question whether you've got the right to remain here. You know, why is that? Why would we need to prove it again that we actually do?
Stephen Wolfe, why do you want less of this? Why do so many people in this country want less of a man who works hard, pays his taxes, contributes so much?
That's exactly the opposite of what the studies that I've researched, what Rob was talking about. When you look at the actual overall research, most people will say that we appreciate the elements of immigration, but they want the highly skilled, they want those who will come here and work and pay their taxes. What they don't want is to have the large numbers that we've coming in at the moment. Let's take a case. We've been talking about Windrush. Between the period of 1945 to 1972, the numbers, percentage-wise, of non-UK born citizens only moved up 2%, 3.5 to 5.5. But in the last 15 years, we've had 4 million people coming in, and our non-born UK-born citizens now is up to over 14%. And what people are saying is when we look across our own communities, we see the impacts on hospitals and schools and roads and all of those impacts. They are not directing their concern and ire at the individual immigrant. What they are doing is directing the ire of the politicians. And let's point...
Isn't most of it imagined?
No, it's not imagined, because we can look at...
I mean, these are all people who are net contributors to the economy. They're more likely to be in work, and there's no academic study that shows they're a drain on anything.
There are lots of studies that are showing out. The Bank of England undertook a study during 2015 that showed that for the poorest sectors of our community, wages have dropped. In our own labour force surveys, you show that there are static numbers and actually reducing wages in terms of wage growth, and that's indisputable. But one of the other aspects about it is when we talk about this, we are undermining the public. We keep constantly calling them stupid and thick, in the same way that Gordon Brown called one of his own constituents and supporters of the Labour Party a bigot just for challenging the idea that we need to control migration.
Okay.
People just want to control it.
Lots of people shaking their heads over here. I just want to find out why. Axel, Anthony, you were shaking your head. Why?
It is actually quite funny what you say there, because we look at it, and yes, there are pressure points when there's spikes in immigration, and there was an immigration impact fund which got abolished in 2010, 2012. So the local communities, yes, if there's loads of immigration coming in, there are pressure points. But what you're saying is not right, that there is a net contribution, and I wonder, the net contribution of EU citizens alone is 2 billion a year. There's an official study out about that. I wonder where that £2 billion has gone, where the new hospitals are, where the schools are, where the policemen are on the street, that are funded by that money that I and many other EU citizens are putting in this economy.
And also, I think the point comes around that there's no leadership. The leadership from the political party is not there, and they cannot sort of, justify lack of investment in hospitals and schools is not due to immigration. That's due to a structural problem within the political parties. They could never decide their priorities, and they're always chasing votes. That's the problem. The biggest voter, as we go back to the immigration debate and to the Brexit, the people who have not had any immigration in their areas, they were voting Brexit because there was this immigration phobia which was sold across, and that's where the political parties have failed the Britain as a decent society.
If you handled public services a bit better, there wouldn't be this hatred of immigrants, would there?
I think we're mixing up issues again. You know, we are mixing up issues. This isn't about a failure of political parties. This is about a general policy over many years of allowing uncontrolled immigration into our country. We've had free movement
but maybe if you made sure hospitals weren't under-resourced and schools had more places,
but
people wouldn't feel the pressure.
If you want to talk about how to run an economy and how to make sure the Exchequer has the finances, then elect a government that knows how to run things, because the reason why we have a lack of resources is because we went bankrupt, really, under the last Labour government, the same Labour government that actually allowed uncontrolled immigration, which is what we're having to deal with today.
That's, you know, when you don't invest in infrastructure, it takes a lot of time to catch up, and we are still world's 5th largest economy, but our infrastructure is still like a third world country, and we're trying to do catch-up. So I think we should realize that the issue when somebody goes to the hospital or to the schools and they can't find a space, it's not because there's few immigrants who have come back in the area. It's because that the schools have not been developed.
Okay.
And you know, one more issue which is coming.
Hang on, because you had a good. I'll try and come back to you, but Laura Clark's trying to get in here. Just tell us what your situation is.
My situation is that I'm British. I was born here. My whole family are from here, and I have a foreign partner from Ethiopia, and we have a child together, and I can't get him here, and I've been battling now for 2 years. My child, I call him on a phone that doesn't have a smart screen because I have to use like a mobile because of poor internet in Ethiopia. My son calls that daddy. Okay? This has been awful. For the last 2 years, I have suffered so much. I am under so much financial pressure, emotional pressure. I'm bringing up a child alone when he could be here as a teacher supporting us. And my child has not been able to bond with his father in the most formative years. And I want to state, Theresa May said children's welfare are at the heart of immigration laws in the UK. They're not. The Supreme Court told the government they need to make amendments and look at alternative funds. I have alternative funds. My parents are there to support me. Yet we're being told it's likely to be denied, and I'm left with a £7,000 initial application as a single parent. Well, I am a single parent because I'm living as one.
You see, the truth is, Andrew Rossendale, that if Laura was married to anybody in Europe, they'd be here now, wouldn't they?
Out of the EU, he may be getting in because he will be white. That's the thing. Canadian, Australian, South Africa, wherever. If you are white, you will get in. I'm sorry to say that, and I'm sorry to jump. I mean, if you can forgive me to say something, please. I'm a councillor in Boston, which has the high rates of Brexiters, 70, I think, 73%, and I am Brexiter. My wife is Polish. We've been married for 22 years. My boys, they went to the grammar school, and I have good experience, and I'm British citizen. I'm proud to be. What is the problem? The problem with the government, they are deceiving people. Everything is vague. We don't know the truth. When did the Windrush? Who did it? It's Theresa May, the Prime Minister, who instigated these issues and burn and get rid of all the paper. Sorry, just to say one more thing.
Just let Andrew Rossdale answer that, because we don't have a lot of time. So
for this discrimination, she should go to the Human Rights Court in Europe.
Let's narrow this down very simply. We all agree that Britain benefits from immigration. We've always had immigration. So what we need is a sensible policy to ensure that the right people are allowed to come into our countries. We could resolve issues such as we've been hearing. It's tragic what I've just heard. But if you could let me finish, please. Like most countries in the world, they have a system. There is a process.
So what system do you want?
If I want to go and work in Canada, I have to apply. I cannot just walk in. So leaving the EU means we can treat everybody fairly.
Everybody the same?
And on merit, yes?
So will everybody from India, Pakistan be treated the same as the Australians and the Canadians?
It should not matter your race or your nationality. It should be about the individual. So if the individual
in the future,
applies
after
and
Brexit,
gets an application, we can do that. You can't do it within the European Union because you have preferential treatment for EU citizens, whilst an Australian or an Indian or a Jamaican cannot have the same rights.
So if
as
Theresa
a German,
May
a
does a
Swede,
deal
or a
with
Bulgarian.
Europe, which means that European citizens have a preferential access to the British immigration system, you'll vote against that, will you?
We voted to leave the European Union, which means that our immigration system is not tied to the EU anymore. And therefore,
yes,
in
but
future,
part of the deal is likely to be preferential access.
In future, absolutely clear about this, we should treat everybody equally and on merit. And that's what our government has to do.
Roshan Ali,
Sorry,
do you agree with that?
I would like to say something about that.
Well, I'd just like to say that the culture and the environment that the Conservative government has created is a hostile environment. I've had that ban saying go back coming through my constituency, and that is not.
Do you
that's
think
not
everybody
about.
should face the same set of rules in the future?
Well, let's
or
just
should
get on
Europeans
to, but
get
they're
professional?
not. The point is, they're not. The government pretty much has got double standards in terms of the way they treat people. They promised, Priti Patel made a commitment to people from the Commonwealth, saying, if you leave the European Union, you'll find it easier for your relatives to come here. That's just nonsense. You'll find it easier to come and bring people to work
But there should be equal treatment for everybody.
Nonsense, though. That's not what's happened. It's hypocrisy. It's double standards. They said what they wanted to in order to win that.
We have another
win that
expert trying to get in. Catherine Barnard, down here in the front. Yes.
So the question is, at the moment we have a two-tier system. EU, more favourable access, non-EU, very difficult access. We've just heard visa fees extremely high, very bureaucratic process, very time-consuming. The question going forward is, do we go to that model for everybody, both EEA and so outside, those in the EU, those outside the EU, or does the government make it easier for everyone to come in? I think that's unlikely. So the reality is that we will probably have some sort of two-tier system going forward.
Stuart MacDonald, should everybody be treated the same?
Not the same, but everybody should be treated fairly. I mean, it's also wrong to say that the system is just two-tier. Historically, British immigration laws...
It's loads of tiers.
Yeah, exactly, and different rules apply to
and
different
literally
countries.
lots of tiers.
Well, yeah, indeed, and,
Yes.
and different rules applying to different countries as well. So, I mean, I believe in the membership of the single market. The customs union is a very good thing, and I think free movement of people is a very good thing. So I would agree all of those things, but none of that means you cannot have a fair immigration system for people coming from other countries as well. Fixing those horrendous family immigration rules for a start, fixing post-study work rules, student rules and so on as well.
We must pause there, actually. We're just pausing the debate on television because we need to let viewers of Channel 4 News go.